shall fly.
Welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in Star Trek Picard, Season 3, Episode 9, Vox. As Deanna tries to get Jack to open the red door in his mind, we hear the song, I Can't Stop Crying Over You.
I can't stop crying.
This track is by Wilgrove White, and though it has an old-timey jazz feeling, it was, in fact, composed and recorded in the 21st century, and was even on the Fleabag soundtrack. Jack makes it seem like this song was something that he remembered from Beverly's playlist, which means if Jean-Luc liked this song, then maybe he was a fan of Fleabag.
The next man who walks in here is getting ridden to death. Dad!
Hey.
Not ideal.
Deanna urges Jack to talk about the vines in his vision, saying they're almost like neurons. This foreshadows a similar scene later on in the episode when Jack is talking to, spoiler alert, I mean, come on, you know who.
Oh yeah, because, okay, back in episode 8, Vadic said that thing about how it was appropriate that 7 of 9 was there to learn the truth about Jack, so...
Yeah, but let's not go there yet.
And you know, like, Jack keeps talking about longing for connection, and you know, he's able to, like, control people for short periods of time, like his own mini-Jack collective.
Okay, you know what? Actually, the spoiler is right at the top of the episode, so let's just do it.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be awesome. High five.
High five. After Jack tries to avoid opening the red door, we get a memory of him going over the Crimson Arbitorium on Raritan 4 when he was a young child with his mom. Crimson Arbitorium is a reference to the Red Forest in 12 Monkeys, the big mystery box for that Terry Matalas show, while Raritan 4 is a planet that the Stargazer visited at the beginning of Picard Season 2.
Oh, okay, so is this like that nice Alice and Pillborg then, from that season?
No, not at all.
Doesn't count.
Actually, back in Episode 4 of Picard Season 3, we were explicitly told to think of the Jurati Borg as separate when Shaw said,
Forget about all that weird shit of the Stargazer. The real Borg are still out there.
Plus, Raritan is mostly a reference to Raritan, New Jersey, where Terry Matalas grew up, and also the site of the Raritan Laboratories in 12 Monkeys. Anyway, after the red door does get answered, Troy runs away as fast as she can, and we later learn what she saw.
It's the Borg. I knew it.
Yes, we see a Borg cube, and we hear the Borg say,
We are Borg.
As Picard and Beverly reel back from the news, we hear quotes from the TNG classic The Best of Both Worlds, in which Picard says, chillingly,
I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile.
Throughout the episode, we learned that the season-long obsession with Jack is all because his DNA contains organic Borg code, which can activate other people who have similar organic Borg code in their bodies. As Geordi later explains,
your son appears to be a transmitter.
When we learn about Jack's organic Borg transmitter status, the graphic on Geordi's screen is that of a very specific diamond. This image has been teased in the Picard Season 3 credits since the first episode, and way back in Episode 4, No Win Scenario, Jack was even fiddling with the straw in 10 Forward, turning it into a red diamond shape. On Twitter, Jorg Hillebrand noticed this a few weeks back and wondered if Jack could be making this shape subconsciously, which of course he is.
But then how come Jack never noticed this before? How come he's only now, like, able to control people's bodies like a Borg prince?
He is a Borg prince, and I'm glad you asked. In the past, the Borg have assimilated people by putting nanoprobes into their bodies, but the idea that they modify someone else's body on the genetic level has been part of Star Trek canon since The Best of Both Worlds. Geordi and Data reiterate this when Geordi says,
All Borg undergo genetic alterations so that their bodies can communicate with their cybernetic components.
And Data says that the stuff in Picard's old body that the changeling stole was,
in fact, dormant biological Borg adaptations.
Everybody getting this so far?
Yeah, okay, so it's like a good old-fashioned TNG episode where with Geordi and Data, they're explaining crazy things to us. Still doesn't explain how Jack can, like, assimilate people without nanoprobes. It's not like anyone on the Titans got random Borg genetic code inside of them.
But they do. Later in the episode, we learned that the dormant biological Borg code from Picard's old body has very recently slipped into the transporter system of pretty much every single Federation starship.
Who put that code in the transporters? Was it Barclay?
Close. It was the changelings.
Using the changelings to infiltrate starships and add this new Borg DNA into everyone who steps inside a transporter.
Now, the idea that the changelings are working with the Borg and tampering with transporters goes back to Episode 4, in which one of the first changelings we saw was working as a transporter tech. Then, in Episode 5, Ro told Picard that she didn't trust the transporters and boarded the Titan in a shuttle. Similarly, even Vadic didn't want to use transporters in Episode 7. So, the clue that something was up with transporters has been there almost since the very beginning. And by the way, the revelation that Picard's neural disorder was not Ironic syndrome means that his diagnosis in All Good Things and the subsequent death of Picard in Season 1 were pretty much all the Borg's fault. On top of that, this dormant Borg genetic code explains a very specific moment in First Contact, when Jean-Luc Picard was able to hear the Borg fleet. Speaking of hearing things ever so faintly, when Picard is worrying about Jack and leaving in a shuttle, and Data comes in to comfort him, we faintly hear some clock chime, which are the exact same clock chiming sound effects used from Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Have we not heard the chimes at midnight?
Oh, and by the way, I just want to say hi.
Oh, hi.
Not hi to you, hi to Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Sam. Crusher tells Jean-Luc that because she lost Wesley, she watched Jack closer. Now, this references, again, Wesley's departure for another plane of existence with the Traveler in Journey's End, which is a far less scary departure than your kid going off to join the Borg. Jack takes a shuttle, which takes him into a transwarp conduit, which is how the Borg got around in Descent in TNG and also in Voyager. And in a very deep cut, when Jack's shuttle enters the transwarp conduit, there's a static kind of sound effect cut that is very similar to the Borg cutting into Starfleet transmissions in First Contact.
We are the Borg.
Jack is taken to a kind of Borg cube city ship, which is vaguely reminiscent of Titan City from 12 Monkeys. Now, it's tempting to say that Jack is in the Delta Quadrant, but we're not exactly sure where all this transwarp conduit stuff has taken him or where this very specific Borg cube is located. The Borg Queen tells him that his Borg name is Vox, which is also the name of this episode, and in Latin it means voice, while locutus means to speak. Jack quips that the Borg have
Fullness for Latin, I say.
which is why the Queen says,
Not Locutus, the one who speaks.
Now, although we do not see the Borg Queen's face, her voice is that of Alice Creek, who first played the Borg Queen in Star Trek First Contact and again in the series finale of Star Trek Voyager: Endgame. All of this seems to imply the strange face talking to Vadic throughout the show was, in fact, the Borg Queen all along.
What?
Now, we don't know what Jack's endgame is at this point, but he does allow the Borg to jack into his brain, and when he does, his eyes go black, just like Seven's when she created a micro-collective in the Season 1 finale of Picard. Meanwhile, as the Borg and Changeling plot is all unfolding above Earth, the Frontier Day festivities are kicking off. Now, in all the screens and graphics, there are a lot, and I mean a lot of Easter eggs, just in the names of the various starships, including the USS Okuda, named for Star Trek designers Michael and Dennis Okuda, USS Drexler, named for Trek artist Doug Drexler, the USS Akira, named for the excellent anime sci-fi film, the USS Luna, probably the first Luna-class ship, like Riker's original Titan, USS Excelsior, which of course comes from Star Trek 3 and was Sulu's ship in Star Trek 6, though this Excelsior is a newer, upgraded version and probably the same one that Raffi served on very briefly at the beginning of Picard Season 2.
Wow, there's a lot of ships. They put all those Easter eggs in there? That's really cool.
And that's not all, because we've also got the USS Ross, probably named for Admiral Ross from Deep Space Nine, the USS Forrest, probably named for Admiral Forrest in Enterprise, the USS Castillo, which must be named after Richard Castillo, that hunky sweetheart from the Enterprise C, the USS Hikaru Sulu,
Oh my.
the USS Jinghe, which was Riker's flagship in Picard Season 1, the USS Harlan was probably named after Harlan Ellison, writer of City on the Edge of Forever, and some version of a new USS Reliant, which of course is a reference to
Khan!
That's right, that is the ship that Khan stole in The Wrath of Khan. The Frontier Day celebrations officially begin with the USS Enterprise NCC-1701F heading out of space dock. Now, back in that first episode, it was teased that this version of the Enterprise was scheduled for early decommissioning, which is what seems to be happening here. The Enterprise is being commanded by Admiral Shelby, who is played by Elizabeth Dennehy, reprising her role from the Best of Both Worlds. The dockmaster that says,
Copy that, Enterprise. We're clear for departure.
is once again the voice of Picard showrunner Terry Matalas, who previously welcomed Riker and Picard to the Titan in the first episode.
Admiral Picard, Captain Riker, welcome to the Titan.
Shelby reveals that Frontier Day is the anniversary of the first voyage of the NX-01, which references Captain Archer's Enterprise, and in a small nod, we get some music from that series.
It's been a long time.
No, not that awesome theme, this music. Now, Picard and Riker are both a little cranky about seeing Shelby in charge of Frontier Day, and not just because she's about to hand over Starfleet to the Borg and the Changelings. Back in the Best of Both Worlds, Shelby wanted to become first officer of the Enterprise and kick Riker off the ship.
You're in my way.
Picard notes that there's an irony in her endorsing something so Borg-like, which references the fact that Shelby was a Borg expert in TNG. As the fleet activates its new integrated fleet formation mode, Crusher realizes that the new Borg genetic assimilation code won't work on people over 25 because...
Which is when the frontal cortex stops development.
So this might not affect us.
But it will affect the youngest members of the crew.
Oh, so all the olds are gonna have to save the day? Kind of like the end of that movie, Battleship. It won an Academy Award.
Battleship didn't win an Academy Award. And actually, it's a little more like the counterclock incident, when Captain April had to save the day because she was old enough to not get turned into a baby.
Wow, deep cut, high five.
Now, as the younger Titan crew are assimilated, Picard reminds everyone to keep their phasers on.
Stun only!
Which is a bit of reversal for him because in First Contact he told the crew to take out any crew members who had been assimilated, a fact which he later felt bad about.
You may encounter Enterprise crew members who've already been assimilated. Don't hesitate to fire. Believe me, you'll be doing them a favor.
Now, in the end, everyone from Sydney to Mura to Esmer are all assimilated. And as Esmer takes the captain's chair, they say,
Collective, we have a Titan.
all our 50 and over action heroes escape, proving they are not too old for this shit, and Deanna notes,
I've never been so happy to see so many wrinkles.
everybody decided to get off the Titan, but they have to use a maintenance shuttle to do it. But in the massive phaser fight to escape, Captain Shaw is hit. Raffi decides to cover Seven and Shaw as the TNG crew escape, and tragically, as Shaw dies, he gives command of the Titan to Seven, saying,
It's not my ship anymore. It's yours. You have the command. 709.
Oh, okay, give her her own spin-off show now, okay?
Right? Make Star Trek Legacy happen, Paramount. Hashtag Star Trek Legacy. Let's get that trending. I really want to see a spin-off of the show. The TNG crew head back to the Fleet Museum where Geordi revealed what he was hiding in Docking Bay 12, which was something that Alondra mentioned back in episode 6.
Dad, what about Hangar Bay 12?
Geordi knows the crew needs a ship that is analog, offline from the others, and so we get the Enterprise D.
The Enterprise D. How?
Back in Star Trek Generations, the Enterprise D saucer was separated when the drive section had a warp core overload. The crew crashed the saucer onto the planet Veridian 3, where we assumed that it had remained. But Geordi tells us that Starfleet retrieved the saucer because of the Prime Directive. It turns out that Geordi had been restoring the D bit by bit for the last 20 years. The engineering drive section seems to partially come from another ship called the USS Syracuse. Geordi also mentions the Enterprise E is unavailable, and everybody gives Worf a dirty look. This prompts Worf to say,
That was not my fault.
This references the idea that Worf was the captain of the Enterprise E at some point in the past, but that its final mission has been classified for a while. Seems like Worf made the classic mistake of loaning the ship to your mom. As the crew enters the TNG bridge, we see several classic control panels, and even the original dedication plaque, which, if you look closely, will contain the name Gene Roddenberry. Now, it should be noted that this version of the TNG bridge is what we last saw in The Next Generation itself, and not in the movie Generation. In that film, the bridge was slightly darker and was bigger on the sides, which may explain Riker's quip.
Is the bridge smaller or am I just bigger?
Picard also makes a joke that he didn't realize the one thing he missed of all, more than anything, was
the carpet.
Now, this is a reference to the fact that back in the 90s, the Star Trek ships tended to have carpet on the bridge sets, but the newer sets tend to be smoother and slicker. But look, it's not just vintage carpet on this Galaxy-class ship. Geordi tells Worf that the drones are loading torpedoes into the bays, and that this Enterprise will be able to fight. It should also be noted here that according to showrunner Terry Matalas, nothing about this version of the Enterprise D bridge has been created through CGI or AR wall trickery. This is 100% an entirely rebuilt version of this set, created from scratch by David Blass and the Picard Season 3 production design team. Everything you see in this set is a real set, and in a way augmented by archival footage or visual manipulation. When Picard formally takes command of the Enterprise, the computer says,
Authorization acknowledged. USS Enterprise now under command of Captain Jean-Luc Picard.
Now this is the voice of the late Majel Barrett, wife of Gene Roddenberry and the person who played Number 1 in The Cage and Nurse Chapel in the original series, and Loxana Troy throughout TNG, and she was the voice of the Enterprise computer in both TOS through TNG, even in the 2009 J.J. Abrams movie. In fact, this is the first time her voice has been used for the computer since that film. Now, because the computer calls Picard Captain and not Admiral, he says,
I hereby accept the field demotion.
Which completes a kind of running joke throughout the season in which various characters, from Riker to Jack to Data, have called him Captain instead of Admiral. As the Enterprise D is fired up, Crusher already starts calling him Captain again, saying,
All systems online, Captain.
The episode ends with Troy and Riker reminding Picard that they are all family and that they're ready for the last ride.
How can we not talk about family when family's all that we got?
Riker says,
We are the crew of the USS Enterprise.
And with that, the crew and the family are back together again on the set that made these 7 actors into legends and heroes to millions of real families. So good. Picard says engage here, and though things are a little tense, it feels a lot like the first time he said it at Encounter at Farpoint.
Engage.
Engage.
As Enterprise D heads out of the Fleet Museum, we can see the NX-01 refit Enterprise right behind it, which is a nice nod to the Frontier Day celebrations earlier in the episode. On top of that, the nature of the space cape just behind the Enterprise D feels very reminiscent of the painting in Jean-Luc's Ready Room, which was discussed in the first episode of Picard Season 3, and, as 80s kids will remember, was also a poster you could own if you ate enough Cheerios. So, can the Enterprise D stop the Borg and the Changelings? Will Jack survive to star in his own spin-off of Seven? The biggest next-generation adventure is only a week away. Well guys, that's all the Easter eggs we found, but if you found any, let us know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, welcome to the channel. Please subscribe so you get those alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.